Have you ever felt as though if you died in a video game, you die in real life? Welcome back, my fellow gamers. This is Top 10 Gaming and I'm your host, Amanda McKnight. Some video games do such a good job of putting us in the position of the character that we're playing as, creating that intense atmosphere around us that we feel anxiety as though we were actually in that situation. That anxiety leaves us feeling terrified to death of being caught and torn limb from limb by whatever it is that's chasing us, adding to the horror of our death. Today we're going to be counting down the top 10 scary ways to die in video games. The deaths that felt so horrific you almost couldn't bring yourself to continue playing, or you were at least terrified of dying again. Most of these deaths come from horror games, but not all horrific video game death experiences exist solely within that genre of games. If you love scary moments in games and horror games in general, click on over here to check out our top 10 scary gaming playlist. And be sure to stick around to the end of this list as well, where we'll be taking it to the comments and hearing some of your thoughts. Alright, now let's get counting. Number 10. Torn Apart by the Witch. This death comes to us from Left 4 Dead. One of the most frightening things about it is you'll hear the witch before you see her, but you won't always know where she is. While avoidable, this also means because you sometimes don't know exactly where she is lurking, that you could just turn the corner and easily walk into her safe space, aggravating her. The witch is one of the special infected from Left 4 Dead. If you do manage to trigger her attack, she is insanely powerful and fast, and will charge towards you. Once she catches you, you are likely a goner unless you happen to get off some devastating shots and have your team nearby ready to help you take her down. Her initial attack knocks you to the ground, and she then pins you down and rips your flesh apart with her long, deadly claws. Number 9. You decide. Game of Thrones, the Telltale game, offers some of the most terrifying death scenes because, well, it's Game of Thrones. The most frightening thing too is that your characters could die at any time because of one choice you made, setting you on a path of destruction and death for them. Your actions don't just affect your own playable characters, but they also affect the deaths of those closest to them, which is as frightening as it is heartbreaking. We are talking about people also dying in a fantasy medieval times setting, crushed by horses, shot through the head with arrows, burned alive. It's pretty brutal, but hey, Valar Morghulis. Number 8. Loss of your best friend. Oddly enough, the most terrifying death that can happen to you in the game Blair Witch doesn't even really concern you. I've been killed by a ton of trees in that game, but by far one of the scariest video game deaths you'll see is when you are told to kill your animal companion, your dog, Bullet. Not Bullet! You, of course, as Ellis, will refuse to do so. However, just because you refuse doesn't mean that your dog will be safe. Bullet can bound off, and when this happens, he'll become injured. You'll be forced to carry him, and a dark presence will end up threatening the life of your dog. And threatening Bullet's life, the dark presence likely knows it's also threatening your own life and your mental stability. You can kill me as Ellis as many times as you want in that game, but you don't mess with Bullet. Also, if you mess with Bullet, you know I'm gonna die because I'm useless without that dog. Number 7. Jump Scared to Death. In the FNAF VR game DLC The Curse of Dreadbear, we get even more scary minigames coming our way. The Curse of Dreadbear was even more scary because everything was Halloween themed. Many of the games were also quite dark and featured spooky October-y locations, like a haunted mansion filled with animatronics, a hallway on a stormy night where animatronics are lurking around every corner, and a pumpkin patch where your only weapon is a flashlight. Like with many Five Nights at Freddy's games, the atmosphere of the game and timing of the jump scare is what makes the heart-thumping experience of being caught and killed so terrifying. Number 6. Impaled. Outlast 2 has tons of terrifying and traumatizing deaths, but one of the most surprising is when Marta is impaled by a cross. Did anyone expect that one to happen? Which would also be a pretty terrifyingly painful way to go, by the way, and is just really horrific to look at. Of course, this isn't a death that your character experiences, you just get to react to it, but like many of the deaths in this game, that is more than enough to haunt your nightmares or to make you consider maybe not playing anymore. Number 5. Double Trouble. Mortal Kombat has some of the best, or rather brutal, deaths when it comes to those famous finishing moves, aka fatalities. We've seen opponents get skinned, had organs ripped out of their bodies, and even seen them devoured by T-Rexes. Yep, that's a thing that happened. Still, as the years go on, the fatalities only get more graphic and more violent. One of the worst we've seen so far? Noob Saibot's Double Trouble, where he guts his opponent with a sickle and then creates a clone of himself within their wound, which emerges from within them, growing to full size and splitting them in half. Yeah. Number 4. Underwater Shark Attack. I don't know how many of you have played the original Tomb Raider games, but underwater always has been and still is a terrifying area of those games to navigate. And just games in general. I've talked with many friends about this and we're all afraid of underwater levels. There were tons of dangers as well in Tomb Raider that you'd have to deal with even if you knew where to go and you weren't worried about drowning, which to be honest, you probably spent half of your time underwater just worrying and freaking out about that. However, on top of the fear of drowning, you also had anxiety from dangerous underwater creatures like giant great white sharks. If these predators find you and get close enough in any of the Tomb Raider games, they're gonna attack you. And underwater also tends to be a very dark area, so it's possible you don't see these sharks coming. So how do you defeat them? Well, in some cases you'd have to harpoon them or sometimes even shoot those sharks. Now, shooting sharks in the ocean is not as easy as shooting fish in a barrel, let me tell you. Although I also don't think that's very easy either. I think we've seen people do that and it's very hard. And it is also frustrating and a frightening way to die, by shark attack. When I was a kid, I actually had to take breaks from playing Tomb Raider because I found these deaths so traumatizing. Number 3. Sneak Attack. The fact that monsters can easily sneak up on you in Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and that you also tend to freak out at the sight of them, hearing your character breathe heavily and watching your sight start to blur, is what makes death by a monster in this game so frightening. Amnesia: The Dark Descent also does a good job of sometimes making you panic along with your character when you feel like there is no way you can escape, and become more frustrated at the fact that you can't quite see what's chasing you because of the mental state of the character you're playing as. Let's not forget how fast these monsters can strike at you too, and their appearance, which just all adds to the horror. Amnesia proves that you don't need the newest graphics and visuals in order to give someone a good scare and a memorable death. Number 2. Ripped apart, crushed, sliced and diced. Dead Space has some of the most horrific death cutscenes around because they are just so gory, explicit, and graphic. Some of these deaths involve things crawling inside you, taking over your body, yikes, or you being decapitated or even completely chopped up with your limbs being severed before you finally get to die. Not only are you forced to watch your own death, but you also get to witness the terrifying and emotionally traumatizing deaths of other people in the game, who in a lot of cases you can do nothing to help these NPCs. People get ripped apart, stabbed to death, take their own lives, and even crushed. It's a whole other level. Number 1. Ghostly Jump Scare. One of the most scary deaths of course comes to us from one of the most scary games of all time, and it's not even really a full game. Hideo Kojima's PT, which stands for Playable Teaser. This was meant to be a demo for the next Silent Hill game, which never happened due to Kojima and Konami splitting up. Instead, we got Death Stranding, which some have actually linked to this teaser. Still, even without PT being a full game, the teaser provides us with one of the most frightening deaths when we're jumped by the ghost of Lisa. You get to see her face all twitchy staring at you, and then you drop or fall to the floor before the lights fade out. The atmosphere built up around you and the fact that you are sometimes caught unawares by these jump scares is what really makes this one the spookiest. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow gamers. What are some of your favorite horror games? Which deaths do you find the most terrifying? And are there any times you've died in video games and you just were so scared you actually couldn't continue to play? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 Fall Guys fan-made skins. Dylan the Diamond Fell comments, I like those skins, especially the Among Us one. There are some really good ones out there. I've also seen Shrek skins and Despicable Me Minions skins that have brought me much joy, but I personally would really love to see some Monsters Inc. skins show up at some point in this game. The Iconic asks, can I get a shout out? Maybe, I guess. Maybe indeed. Shout out to you, the iconic. Thank you so much for watching and for commenting. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your questions and opinions featured in a future video. This has been Top 10 Gaming, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you as always to keep on gaming on. Pew pew!